Hello everyone and welcome to another game from the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour Finals. It's Jan-Krzysztof Duda versus Magnus Carlsen. This is the second game of their match and it's the game you guys have been requesting even more than the first game, and for good reason. So let's just dive straight into it and see if Duda can bounce back after a loss in round 1 against Magnus. So Duda with the white pieces opens with d4. Sorry about that. We have knight to f6 by Magnus, c4, and now g6, the King's Indian defense. We have f3, going for the sort of an Alekhine anti-Grunfeld variation, d6, and now e4, grabbing the full center. We have e5 now, striking in the center, and here just knight to e2. Here offering a queen trade with this doesn't really do anything. This is perfectly fine, and white really doesn't achieve anything by doing this. So just knight to e2 by Duda, and now c5, going after that center. Duda closes the center with the d5, and now h5 by Magnus. And now there are a couple of moves that have reached this position. For example, knight b to c3 is a known move, h4 is a known move. Alexander Grishuk defeated Yanni Pomnishi with h4 here, but here we have knight e to c3, and it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Magnus continues here. He plays knight b to d7, also just continues development. Now knight to a3. Now this knight can come to c2, then to e3, and then later on we'll be controlling a lot of very important squares here. So h4, Magnus grabs more space here on the king side, and bishop to g5 by Duda. We have bishop to e7, and now bishop back to e3. Bishop to e7 is setting a trap for white, basically. If white just continues developing with something like bishop to d3, we can go for a sort of a all-out trade with knight captures on d5, and then white loses all advantage of the first move. For example, bishop captures on e7, we're going to capture on c3, now offer a queen trade, and you really don't have anything better here. Bishop captures, we're going to play knight captures on d1, rook captures, we're going to play king captures, and black is up a pawn. White doesn't really have anything to show for his position. If anything, he has a light square bishop, and all of his pawns are on light squares, so it's a pretty bad position for white. So instead, bishop back to e3 by Duda, not allowing this exchange, and now a6 by Magnus. We have queen to d2, and now knight to h7. Now you can push f5 if you want. You can castle. You can bring the knight to g5, the bishop g5. Anything is possible here. So g3 by Duda, and now knight to g5. So what do you play here? We have queen to g2, now guarding that f3 pawn. Knight captures on f3 was a threat, and now you have to consider, do you want to go for something like h3 here? Seems like a very interesting move, but Magnus wants to keep the tension here between these pawns and plays f5. He wants to open up lines. We have bishop to d3, and now Magnus advances the pawn all the way to f4. So what do you play here? The problem is, if something like e captures, and bishop captures, you can just castle here, and again, it's a really bad position for white. Your bishop is hanging here, and after bishop captures, it's just a wonderful position for black. The white king is stuck in the center of the board. You can't castle queen side, so it would definitely be black who would have advantage here. The f3 pawn is really weak, so not something you want to go for. So instead, Duda moves the bishop back, bishop to d2, and now h3 by Magnus. Now grabbing more space here, queen to e2, and now only now does he castle king side. We have rook to g1. Duda, of course, now is interested in opening up the g file to be used for this rook, and now rook to f7 by Magnus. We have queenside castles. Duda brings his king to safety, and now queen to f8. So now you have to be careful. If the position opens up, then the f3 pawn really becomes weak. So rook d to f1, and now queen to g7. And now it's time to start bringing our other knight into the game. It's not really doing all that much on a3. Knight to c2 by Duda, and now comes knight to f8. So here we have king to b1, getting the king to a safer square. Knight f to h7 by Magnus. We have knight to e1, as we often say, a lot of horsing around, and bishop to d7. It's time to bring the other rook into the game as well. We have bishop to c2, and now rook a to f8. So a lot of maneuvering, preparing for that breakthrough that will definitely happen, as there is a lot of tension in the position. So here we have g captures on f3 by Duda. we have e captures on f4, e captures on f4, and now knight to d3, so putting some pressure on this f4 pawn, but it's nicely defended by the two rooks. And now bishop to f6 by Magnus. So what do you play here? Now it seems like Magnus is offering the f4 pawn, but if you've seen game one, you know that there really aren't such things as free gifts when playing against Magnus. However, Duda tries it. He plays bishop captures on f4, and okay, Magnus plays bishop captures on c3, now opening up a discovery here towards the bishop. And the problem is, if you play this, then this is just perfectly fine. Captures, captures, and captures, and black is just much better here. You don't really have all that much. You have a knight, basically two knights for a rook. This is completely winning for black. So Duda here plays bishop captures on d6, now puts pressure on the rook on f8, but now bishop to d4, attacking the rook on g1. So what do you play here? Well, there are a lot of possibilities. Of course, we could capture the rook on f8, but Duda tries f4 first. He attacks the knight here on g5, and now Magnus just captures the rook. He plays bishop captures on g1, and now what do you play? Well, the position is very promising for white. Black's position is active, but white's position is active and better. But you have to play rook captures on g1. However, Duda decided to throw in a nice Zwischenzug here, but that simply will not do. Bishop to e5 was played, attacking Carlsen's queen, but Magnus, as you've seen, does not have a problem offering his queen. So first he just plays knight to f6. So for the moment, it's still well, the reason knight to f6 was played is because it's maybe a little bit difficult to calculate, but rook captures on f4 and the queen can be offered right away. The problem is if bishop captures on g7 now, rook captures on f1 check, and that's it. You don't really have a good move. If bishop to d1, we're just going to play king captures on d7, and the position is completely winning for black. Black has simply too much material, and well, there's really nothing to do here with white. So what you could do here is what Magnus, well, you could do that, but Magnus played knight to f6 first. He prepares this idea, and now Duda allows it by playing a certain move. Here you could play, let's say, bishop captures on f6, queen captures and rook captures on g1, and the game continues. However, after this knight to f6 move by Magnus, Duda played f captures on g5, and now it seems like a perfectly winning idea, because now you're attacking the pin piece. But now feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on now offering the queen finally. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight to g4. That's the good stuff. We offer the queen. Not only that, we attack the bishop twice, and not only that, we're threatening rook captures on f1. So what can you make of this? Well, if the queen is accepted, then rook captures on f1 check, and there's nothing to be done here. Bishop to d1, king captures on g7, similar to the queen sacrifice we already discussed. But here, for example, e5, going for something like e6, we're just going to play knight to e3, and there's no defense. The bishop cannot move. You can't bring more defenders here. If e6, we just trade here. Rook captures on d1, queen captures, knight captures, and now let's say e captures on d7, but it's not a problem. I mean, we're up a rook and the bishop, and this pawn will never do anything. We can just pick it up. So black is completely winning here. So after knight to g4, we have bishop to f6 by Duda, preventing these two rooks from wreaking havoc along the f file. But now just bishop captures on h2 by Magnus. He says, all right, I grabbed the pawn, I'm going to move my bishop, and then I'm going to advance my pass pawn, and this is now a really dangerous pass pawn. So e5 by Duda. But now just knight captures on f6. We have e captures on f6, and now Magnus offers it again. He plays bishop back to d6, and now the pawn is going to h2. The problem is the same. Again, if you capture the queen, just rook captures on f1 check, and now let's say knight to c1 or bishop to d1. Doesn't really matter. If bishop to d1, king captures on g7 is completely winning for black, but if knight to c1, we can just even bring the rook here. And what do? If queen to e4, we're just going to play bishop to f4, and there is no defense here. This is now completely winning for black. So really a terrible position for white. So after this bishop to d6 move, we have knight to f4 by Duda, but now there is only one winning move for black, and it's not easy to spot. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus now while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on sacrificing something, anything, as there, there are so many things we could sacrifice here, but only one is good. So congratulations to everyone who found it. The correct move is rook captures on f6. That's the good stuff. We keep control of this f-file, and we remove any pressure that white had over our position. So g captures on f6 is played. It's not much, but you don't really have anything better. We have rook captures on f6 now with a double attack on the knight here, and knight to e6 by Duda. Seems like everything is now fine, but here comes rook captures on f1, queen captures on f1, and now queen to h6. And now the problem white's been having for the entire game pretty much is still here. The pass pawn on h3 is unstoppable. So here we have queen to f6. What do you do here? Well, just h2. This is unstoppable. Now h1 queen is coming. We have bishop to e4, stopping this, at least for the moment, but still just h1 queen. We have bishop captures, queen captures with check, king to c2, and now comes queen to e4 check. And it was in this position on move 41 that Jan-Krzysztof Duda resigned the game, and another impressive victory for Magnus Carlsen in round 2 of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour finals. So yeah, here you resign because there really isn't anything for you to do. The g6 pawn is defended. There are no... there's really nothing you can play if you try something like... oh, you're in check. You can't even try that. You have to move the king, so king to d2. Now we simply capture here, and that's it. Whatever, d captures on e6, we're going to play bishop to f4 check, king to c3, and now let's say bishop to e5 wins the queen, or whatever. There is no playing this position. Whatever you do, you're just going to get destroyed. If you play something like king to d1, it's a very nice checkmating sequence. Queen to d3, king to e1, we're going to play bishop to g3, just cover all of the squares. As you can see, the queen and bishop are doing a fine job of this. You have to interpose with the queen. Now we're going to play queen e3, check first, so we take the queen without giving up the bishop. King d1, let's say the queen captures on f2, and that's it. There's no playing this. So yeah, after queen to e4, Duda resigns, and the game 2 seems to be an even more impressive version of game 1. So we'll see if Duda will be able to bounce back. 2 more games to go in the match. We'll see what happens. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. So many of you have requested it, and for good reasons as usual. Please keep doing that. I would like to thank Zachary Bell, Mike Pomerening, Vast Knowledge, the Dewey Guy, and Tom Deralo for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of this tournament, as all of the games seem, incredible. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.